Welcome to Hope Talks podcast with Grayson Willis and Pastor Margaret Michael, where you'll hear inspiring stories that are filled with hope and good news in Jesus Christ. You can also search for our podcast on iTunes, Spotify, Google Podcasts, and TuneIn. We would love your feedback and invite you to take a short anonymous survey. You can find the link to the survey in the show notes.
Welcome to today's broadcast of Hope Talks. I'm Grayson Willis.
And I'm Pastor Margaret Michael. It's great to be here today.
Today we have Sydney Hayslett. Sydney, how are you doing today?
I'm doing well, thank you. Glad to be here.
Today, Sydney's joined us to talk about Stonehaven. So, Sydney, tell us, what is Stonehaven and how did that come about?
Sure. Stonehaven is a nonprofit that was started about 3 years ago, and our mission is to walk with women in their journey of healing from sexual exploitation. So it's something that's been on my heart for a really long time. God first started talking to me about this population of women, even back as far as high school, and just, through college, I did an internship working with this population, and then after college went and worked for a ministry in Tennessee for about 3.5 years at their residential program, Rest Stop Ministries, and just learned so much about sex trafficking and how it happens and what the healing journey looks like, and just felt called to come back here to Harrisonburg and open up a program here and serve the women in this community that I love so much. So that is what we're about.
Yeah, so recently we had Mandy Lawson in and talked about what New Creation does and how they work with trafficking, especially raising awareness. And I know that that's important, but we also know that when you raise awareness and people start looking, they might find someone that needs a home. What happens then?
Yeah, New Creation's done a really great job of bringing awareness to this community and helping people to see there is an issue here. It's been here all along, but I think people just didn't know what to look for or know what it looks like. And so they have sort of created this need.
Yes.
The need's always been there, but now people are seeing, okay, there are problems. And now we're finding, women that need services, but there is nothing here to help them. And so there's really a gap. When women are, brought to the light, they say, I need help. Well, what do we do? There are 2 other shelters in the state of Virginia. One's in Richmond, and they only serve residents of Richmond.
Okay.
So that doesn't work for us. And then there's also one in Virginia Beach. And with there only being one, they're usually full, have a wait list. And so I'm really passionate, again, about bringing services to this area, serving women in our area and beyond. It's such a need, not just in Harrisonburg, but all over the state and farther. So.
Yeah, you think about just in the circumference of maybe 100 miles, thinking about the cities around Harrisonburg. And if we see a problem here, we have a town here, we have a city, large town, but thinking about cities and the issues, the amount of trafficking, and to think that there's only 2 places and one really that can help people outside of Richmond. So
right, and just to be specific, those 2 places only serve adult females, and that's who we would be serving as well. There are a lot of other populations that need services, minors, boys, men, like all of those people need services as well, but adult females are the largest majority of people that are affected by this issue. Not to say, again, there's not an issue with other people, but women are the largest need, and so we'd like to fill that need first, if we can. So.
Yeah. Right.
I kind of have 2 questions, and you can just, whichever one you want to do first. But how did your time in Tennessee working at the home there help prepare you for what you're trying to open up here in Rockingham County? And also, what are some misconceptions or some things people don't know about trafficking and how to be aware and how to look out for those signs?
Yeah. Well, when I started at Rest Stop Ministries, I started as the assistant residential manager, and so I was really thrown into the fire, for lack of a better term. I was living in the house with the women. I was doing overnight shifts in the house and just, helping with chores and cooking meals and taking them to appointments and that sort of thing, and really got to see what it looked like to be in community with these women. And it was just such a powerful and challenging experience at times. But we started just with when I started, it was a small staff. And then as I was there over 3 years, we grew, and I got to experience a couple different positions there, and just I learned so much about how challenging the healing process really is for these women. I think when I first went into it back in college, I probably thought, these women are going to be so grateful that I'm here to help them. And when in reality, a lot of them working through serious issues. All of them have PTSD. A lot of them have mental health issues, substance abuse issues. And so when you have someone with all three of those things sort of, fighting in their mind, like there's just so much happening and there's so many conflicting feelings, and you just witness a lot when you're living in community like that. There's always disagreements, there's, relapses that you have to deal with, and there's, just serious mental health challenges you have to deal with. And then you also have the unfortunate reality that some women, even after being with you in the home for, 3 months, 6 months, a year, they'll still go back and make that choice to be trafficked again. Not because they necessarily want to, but because they don't know anything else. And so they, experience this new kind of life where they're sort of living semi-normally in community. They're experiencing God's love. They're experiencing like people really caring about them for the first time and not wanting anything in return. And it just, I think, becomes overwhelming and they don't know what to do with that. Like that's very not normal for them. And so, there's a lot of reasons people choose to leave, but I think that was, one of the biggest things I learned was like healing does not look linear. And even after women leave, they will sometimes come back to the program, and it's always so exciting because they'll start off like that much further along this time than they were before, and they gain more tools and resources the more times they try to do it. And, eventually something sticks, hopefully. But, I think that was a big learning thing for me was it doesn't always look like I think it's going to look like. And they're not always going to look like, I want them to look like at the end of the process, So I think that's one of the biggest things I learned. And then I think misconceptions are just, we talked a little bit about people learning about trafficking happening in our community. And I think that's a huge thing is people just don't realize what it looks like. A lot of people think of taken, or they think of abductions, and they think of things happening in other countries. And the reality is it's happening, in our neighbor's house. Anywhere there's vulnerability, you're going to have people that are looking to exploit that. And so I think one of the biggest misconceptions is, it is happening here, and it's happening to friends and coworkers and neighbors.
So you were talking about a lot of times they have addiction. Mm-hmm. Would you expound on that as to why they have addiction? Sure. I think that's, if you go, they're addicted, but it's not their choice necessarily. So if you would just speak to that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So a lot of times addictions is introduced in two different ways. Either, someone is already addicted to substances before they're trafficked, and then trafficking sort of becomes a way for them to support that, or their dealer is someone who's going to go ahead and exploit that and say, well, if you want this, you have to do all these things for me. And so that is a big point of entry for some people. And then on the other hand, you have people who've never experience substance abuse at all. They start to become trafficked and they get hooked on substances either because it's introduced to them or because they really need that to survive what they're experiencing. And same thing, with people that have entered trafficking already addicted. Like they need that to be able to cope with what's happening to them.
Yes. Yeah. So we hear like that people are groomed sometimes when there's trafficking. So I just think, it helps us the more we can be educated on these things and look for signs around us in our community. It's helpful. It's helpful to me. So I would love for you to just talk a little bit about how someone maybe is introduced to this person and it seems like a really good person, good relationship. How can some signs to be looking for as maybe someone trying to groom someone else for this?
Sure. So I would say a couple things. One, if a minor is involved, you're always going to want to be extra careful about what's happening there. A lot of times things like this are happening online. I think Facebook is like one of the number one places that traffickers recruit victims. They're chatting with you. You don't really know who they are. They can say whatever they want to in a chat room, and they're usually, again, looking for vulnerabilities. Do they have support at home? Do they feel loved at home? Do they have financial resources? Are there things that they need that I can, fill in the blank, like give to them? And so I think that's one big thing to look out for if it seems like they're going to do X, Y, and Z to make you happy, Or I think another big thing is looking for like lavish and expensive gifts. If I'm really thinking about minors here. Like if your child comes home with these like very expensive new things, you have to question who's giving these to you, where are these coming from? So I think that's another thing you can look for. And then, if it's an adult, I'm thinking about like, what does this person do for work? Do you really know what they do for work? Are they on the phone a lot? I think there are things you can look for and say, do these things match up with what I'm being told? And just be aware of what exactly is going on,
Yeah.
Does that make sense?
Yeah. Yeah, if there's a lot of unanswered questions around someone as far as what they do, or, yeah, I can see that. It does make sense.
And again, I feel like, I'll say this a lot, they're looking for vulnerabilities, and if you have vulnerabilities that they're aware of and they're looking to, like, exploit them, they're going to be trying to give you everything to make you feel like they're a safe person, and they're going to give you what you need.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. What they have is better than where you are.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
Talking more about Stonehaven and anything you want to share about that, like as far as timeline or events coming up, things like that.
Yeah, so our goal is to open a residential program. We'd like to serve about 6 to 8 women at a time. And we would want to provide things like all your medical needs, all of their needs for like therapy and case management, helping with court things, and just sort of getting all those things together for them that they need to transition to life independently. And so we hope to be a program for about 18 months to 2 years where women can come, stay for free, live in community, do that real hard healing work, and have space to do that. Even if you escape a trafficking situation, unless you have a place to live, food to eat, resources, you can't get that healing work done, and you just end up being re-exploited. And so that's what we want to do, is just give this safe healing space for women to come and do that work. We want to help provide and take care of all of their needs, and really just show them love, and that they're worthy of this other chance, and that they can be, whole and living freely and independently. And so that's our goal. And so we're working towards that. It takes a lot to be able to open a program like this. Namely, it takes money and a property. And so that's really what we've been working on, is fundraising and looking for a property and trying to get those things so that we can be set up for success soon, hopefully.
Yeah, it does take money. It takes not only a property, but it takes staff. And, someone may be listening and go, well, maybe I have something that would be an opportunity or an option for housing. What are you looking for in housing? Like, what does it look like to house a ministry like that?
Ideally, we're looking for a 4 to 5 bedroom house, and it doesn't have to be huge. A little bit of property, and something. I don't want something right in the middle of the city, but I don't necessarily want it to be too far away, because, of course, you're thinking about appointments and getting women to and from things, work, and things like that. We don't want it to be a barrier for transportation and things. But, yeah, just generally something in the Harrisonburg-Rockingham County area.
So there's the need of housing, but you have some things in place. You have your 501c3, you have a board, you have people that are willing to come on as a staff. So it's not like you're thinking about this. You're ready to go.
We're ready to go. We just need the funds and the place,
Yeah.
Well,
it might be a little bit corny, but I think I might have heard Carrie Willis say this one time, that, God has all the resources in the world. They're just in somebody's pocket.
That's right. Yeah, we're praying that those people find us.
Right. And so this is kingdom work. And so say somebody goes, well, hey, I have something I would like to give. I would like to, maybe I have a property. How could they get a hold of you?
Here's my phone number. They can find us on our website, stonehavenva.org. I would love to talk with anyone who feels like they might have something that could help. Everything helps at this point. So,
yeah. You had asked, there was more to your question, Grayson. I'm thinking it had to be with upcoming events. Was that?
Yeah, like any fundraising events or anything like that, if people would be interested in taking part in.
Yeah, so we do have an event October 21st happening at the Lavender Farm. You can buy tickets or be a sponsor of the event. We'll have a silent auction and a brunch, and just let people hear again about the mission of Stonehaven and what we're up to and what we're hoping for. So I'm really excited about that.
And people can find information about that on your website,
yes.
stonehavenva.org.
That's right.
We've talked about this a little bit prior to the show today, but I know that there's a movie out now called Sound of Freedom that has really raised some awareness of trafficking that happens. Would you like to speak to that? Like, I know that this is trafficking in other places, right? And so would you want to talk a little bit about, that's one version, right? That's one place, but is there any thoughts that you've had, maybe Sound of Freedom has brought up, that you would want to share today, even in how we engage locally?
Yeah, there's been a lot of buzz about this movie, Sound of Freedom, and it has been a wonderful way for people to learn about trafficking and learn what's happening, and it is this whole other section of like global child exploitation, which is just a horrific crime that I can't even begin to think about. I can't believe that this happens, but it does. And so I am glad the movie has brought this awareness. I do feel like it makes us as a society sort of like think about that when we think of trafficking. And I think that's good. But I also think it tends to reiterate this idea that like trafficking happens in other places to other people and not to our neighbors and to our community. And so that's where I've struggled with, I am so glad this movie was made. It's a true story. Like the story needed to be told. And we need to be also thinking about where it's happening in our community. And again, Hollywood sensationalizes everything. And so as much as it's a true story, it's also probably a little bit of an embellished, sensationalized story. And that's what sells. That's what people are going to pay to go see. And so that's what will make money. And so that's what they did. And I understand that. But I think we also need to remember, like, trafficking also happens in our neighbor's house, when the mom who's struggling financially and addicted, like, is desperate. And so she makes choices for her family because she's in a situation of desperation, So I just feel like we need to remember both. And I think sometimes things in the media like that can help us like ignore what's happening here and just think about what's happening in other places. And I think we need both, but yeah. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it does tend to pull our attention to somewhere else when truly things like this happen right under our nose.
Yeah.
We were talking about the movie Sound of Freedom, and the day that we're recording this, you had posted something on your Instagram about another movie in the past.
Yeah, that's true.
And you talked about the kidnapping as a small percentage. There are other ways that people are trafficked. So if you want to talk more about that.
Yeah, that'd be good. I was talking about the movie Taken, and it was another like Hollywood story. This girl was abducted in a foreign country, and that does and can happen. It's not necessarily probable. I was talking about Polaris Project, who they have the National Trafficking Hotline, and they take calls from victims and people that have tips, and they sort of take data on all of these calls and all the information about these cases. And so I just looked from there, from 2021, people that I called about sex trafficking cases. The number one recruitment tactic in those cases was a family member that had trafficked the person. And so when you look at, people do get really fearful about abductions and things like that happening, but 40% of those phone calls, they had been trafficked by one of their own family members. Wow. And so that's hard to believe and hard to hear, but the truth is most of the cases, they knew the person that trafficked them. And so I think after that, it was like someone was posing as a benefactor. So, they told them they had a good opportunity for them somewhere, but really they were taking them to be trafficked. And then...
like a relationship?
Yes, and the other one was an intimate partner, so, a romantic partner of some sort had trafficked them. And so those are the top three ways, they had recorded that people had been trafficked. It was not abductions or, being in another country. So it does happen in different ways maybe than we see in the media.
Yeah. If someone wanted to look into that, it's a Polaris Project?
Yeah, Polaris Project. I think it's just polarisproject.org. You can Google them, and they have a whole report about where it happens and how it happens,
like they have a map there that has kind of, you can see on the map just kind of where and...
different hot spots and things like that.
Yeah, which I think is
it's
terrifying,
really,
but it's
a really powerful tool.
Yeah.
And what's the trafficking tip line if people were suspected that maybe somebody was?
Yeah, so the National Trafficking Hotline takes tips, and the number is 888-373-7888.
And it's better to err on the side of caution, right? Like you go, well, should I or shouldn't I? Well, if you walk away from that and go, I wish I would have, because it's someone's life that could be in danger. So earlier, we were talking about New Creation. What is the partnership? Do you have a partnership with them? What does that look like?
Yeah. Well, their executive director, Sabrina, is someone that I've known for a long time. When I first felt like I wanted to get into this work, she's one of the first people I went to. She was here doing this work all those years ago when I first started thinking about it. So, yeah, she's been a longtime friend, and of course, I came to her when I was ready to come back here and open up Stonehaven, and so we've worked closely together and we collaborate for sure. I think, Sabrina and New Creation, they do the prevention and the education piece really well, like we've talked about. They're in the schools, and so they are really doing some hard work in the community to make sure people know what's going on. However, they do not do direct services. I should say they don't want to do direct services. Right. I think people still go to them a lot when they feel like they have a situation, and so they're wanting to sort of step back from that and let Stonehaven sort of come in and fill that direct service gap, where we, again, there's nothing in this area for women, and so that's what we're aiming to do. New Creation will be the prevention, education, and we will hopefully be that direct service piece that serves women long term.
That's good. Just in wrapping up today, I think it might be interesting to hear, how did you come up with Stonehaven?
Yeah. So when I had a friend and I that were really working on Stonehaven initially, she was one of my coworkers at Rest Stop, and so she and I were brainstorming about names, and we knew we loved the word haven just because of it, it representing safety and being that safe place. And we were trying to figure out, it's got to be something haven, and we went through all the different words, and we just were very stumped for a few days. And then I was in my Sunday school class in Tennessee, and we were talking about 1 Samuel 7:12 and the verses. Then Samuel took a stone and set it up between Mizpah and Shen. He named it Ebenezer, saying, "Thus far the Lord has helped us." And so, a little bit of context is the Israelites were fighting the Philistines, and they won. And so Samuel set up this altar, this rock that sort of said, here is where God helped us. It's a physical reminder of something that happened, and they did that a lot in the Old Testament, with stones, setting up these physical altars. And so I just immediately I was like, oh my goodness, it has to be Stonehaven. I want this home to be that for women, this reminder of God brought me here and God helped me here. And so, it's even for me right now, this will be a reminder that God helped us get here. He helped us find the resources we needed, and he helped us bring these women in and just usher them into this healing journey that hopefully will set them on a new path for their life. And so that really is the story behind why we're called Stonehaven. Yeah. A lot of the other words were taken already, that we tried. So I was glad Stonehaven was available, and it just fit perfectly with what we were hoping for. And, stone also just has this, it's a solid, represenation of it's, again, safety and security and steadfastness, and it's sort of stone and haven. They just, I feel go together well. So
that's beautiful.
Sydney, anything else in closing that you would like to share with us?
Yeah, I did think about something I wanted to just touch on. I think a lot of people wonder, why am I not seeing this? And I think back to those misconceptions, I think people have thoughts about what it looks like. Again, they think when they hear pimp or they hear prostitute, they have these specific images in their mind of what that looks like. And they have thoughts that okay, these women made this choice to be here, I don't feel bad for her. When in reality, we know that human trafficking, it encompasses force, fraud, and coercion. And that leaves women without a choice. Force and fraud are sort of easy to point out, but when you think about coercion, and if women are being coerced, it can look much more like psychological manipulation and warfare, and it can look, and it does look like abuse and threats and things like that. But I think the more subtle, coercion, women don't feel like they have a choice, but at the same time they feel like they're the ones making the choice and no one is making that choice for them. Does that make sense? Mm-hmm. And so I think, again, when we think about people that have vulnerabilities like addiction and mental illness, we just don't think of them as victims or as someone who's being trafficked. I think we think they've made their choices, and that has nothing to do with me, Yeah. And so I think understanding that all those things can play a role in someone being exploited for those vulnerabilities. And so, I don't know. I feel I just wanted to bring that up because we didn't really talk about exactly why we miss it or what to look for, but I think those are big things to look for, addiction, mental illness, and things like that.
Yeah, I think sometimes we might be in the Walmart parking lot, right? Mm-hmm. Just let's put it in a context of we may be in a Walmart parking lot and we see something which looks like it, maybe this couple are arguing or, there can be things that we just kind of put off as, well, they're having a bad day, which indeed it could be something that's much deeper. And being willing to even to make sure, like, what would you say if you, let's just say someone is out somewhere, and let's just say just a very simple, someone is out in the community and they see something that maybe before they heard this, they would have just went, well, looks like they're having a hard day or not getting along. What would you say to that person? What would you say to someone that goes, well, you know what? I saw something. I've been seeing something. Like maybe it's someone that they see walking the same place, or what would you say? What should they do?
Yeah, I think I would say maybe a couple things to think about. If you feel like something is off, then probably something is off. I think we always need to listen to our gut telling us. And then there are some like physical things you can look for. Obviously, signs of abuse. You can look for maybe what the person is wearing. Does it match what season it is? Do they look uncomfortable? Are they wearing just something that you shouldn't be wearing walking around town? You know, you can look for tattoos. A lot of times traffickers use tattoos as like branding symbols on people. And so if you see something that looks like it could fit that description, you know, that's something to look for. And then, but yeah, I think people like just need to pay attention to that gut feeling that you get. Like, this just doesn't seem right. And again, if you're seeing a pattern that seems off, you know, I think that's always something to pay attention to. Again, it never hurts to call a tip line and just say, here's what I'm seeing. Do you think there's anything of it? You know, that can't hurt anything to just always call.
Yeah, that's the thing. We have, as human beings, we have a responsibility just to be aware in our community and to not miss the obvious, I guess.
Right.
Because it is a life. It's someone's daughter. It possibly could be someone's mother, you know? So, yeah, thank you for just clarifying some of that.
Sydney, in closing, how can people that are listening, how can they pray for Stonehaven?
Yeah, I think just praying, again, that we're able to find the resources we need, not just with the funding, but with, you know, community partnerships and all those different things that we'll need to really get off the ground. We'll have to, you know, have a special use permit and, you know, all those sort of logistical things that can be hurdles. Just praying that those things go through. Of course, they can pray for the staff and the volunteers. You know, hopefully that soon we're preparing a place for these women, and just pray for safety for these women, and even now before they, you know, receive services, that wherever they're at, they feel the peace and the presence of God, you know, and that somehow they can find us and find the help that they need.
Pastor Margaret, in closing, can you just pray for Sydney and for Stonehaven?
Absolutely. I'd love to. Lord, we're just grateful today to sit around the table and talk about reconciliation, taking the hand of the broken and the hand of God as ministers of reconciliation. And that's a beautiful picture of this ministry. And so I thank you for the call that you are continuing to call us, like you've called Sydney and this team, to minister to the broken. And these are the people, Jesus, that you sat beside and you care compassionately for, and you put that love in our hearts and in the hearts of the Stonehaven staff. And so I just pray, Father, over this home. God, you already know where it's at. And so I just pray that you will just work out those details beautifully. The home, all of the partnerships that have to happen in a community to work within a community where we're working together for the good of those that are facing instability and brokenness. And God, I pray that you would, just thinking as we were sitting here wrapping up today, just thinking about the women that are in bondage and in captivity and in a place where they cannot see their life being any different. And God, your word says that you have things planned for your children that they've never even thought of or imagined. And I pray that you will set the captives free, that this ministry will plant seeds and water seeds and plants, and that there will be stories, testimony of how lives have been changed by you and by those that are called to do this important work, kingdom work in these days in this valley. And I just pray protection over all of those involved and over their families. And I pray it in Jesus' powerful and matchless name. Amen.
Amen. Well, Sydney, thank you for joining us today. It's been great to have you.
Yeah, thanks so much.
Thank you for listening to today's broadcast of Hope Talks. We pray that as you've heard Sydney Hayslett talk about Stonehaven and trafficking, that it truly has been a half hour of hope for your life. May God bless.
Hope Talks is sponsored by Church of the Nazarene Harrisonburg in partnership with Sunshine Ministries.
Thanks for listening to today's podcast of Hope Talks. If you enjoyed the podcast, please subscribe for updates and the latest episodes. Also, if you're in the Harrisonburg-Rockingham County area, we invite you to listen on the radio each Sunday at noon on 1470 AM or 102.1 FM WBTX.